Hello, my name is Emily Crow from Crochet Creations and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I want to talk to you about some unpopular fiber related opinions. This is a really fun topic that I've seen floating around on the interwebs a little bit. People responding to unpopular opinions that their followers sent them, and so I asked over on my Instagram, which is at Crochet Creations, some unpopular opinions that people wanted to share with me, either that they had or that they knew others had, so that I could share them here on my YouTube channel. I thought it would be fun to react and kind of talk about some of these opinions and whether or not I agree with them. Thought that might be interesting. If this is something you want to see more of, let me know down below. I think this will be really fun as a knit and chat type of a video. I've got my no frills sweater by Petite Knit and I am knitting on this if you haven't seen it in my recent podcast episodes. I am using Madeline Tosh Impressions Mohair in the color New Moon. It's beautiful variegated. And then I'm using some Knit Picks or We Crochet palette yarn, holding it with it in the color Ice Lily. So I have finished the sleeves of my sweater and now I'm working on the body. So I'm just knitting it around and around, and I thought this would be a great project to just work on while I'm chatting with you a little bit. As a disclaimer, these are all my own opinions in response to some unpopular opinions shared with me on social media. I am not going to share who shared these opinions. It is all anonymous, and I'm going to do my best to be respectful to others and to be cognizant of how other people's opinions might be different, but this is all just for fun. I'm sharing things that I think about these opinions and just kind of chatting with you here. On that note, let's get into this. I already collected these opinions and put them on a Google Doc so that I could look through and have them all organized and I could read them since I'm filming on my phone right now. Let's take a look. Mosaic knitting looks bad. I honestly haven't done any mosaic knitting personally. My understanding is that it's a way to do color work while only utilizing slip stitches. So each round you're only using one color of yarn. You're not holding two strands or multiple strands of yarn at the same time and switching between them in the same row or round. And so mosaic knitting is a way to kind of get around that and use slip stitches, which I really like slip stitches. I like doing them. I like them as a texture, and I don't see anything wrong with mosaic knitting. I've not ever seen a pattern that I don't like that's mosaic knitting. Maybe I should give it a try. I think it would be fun to do something a little different. Ooh. Rhinebeck seems overrated and like we probably annoy the sheep and wool folks there. So this is like a two-part response. Rhinebeck seems overrated. I would have to disagree, because if you've ever been to a sheep and wool or fiber festival, it's really neat to be around like-minded people that love these crafts and to see some beautiful handmade products that are either fiber related or fiber adjacent. Yeah, it's just a really cool experience. I have not been to many, and so I don't know if Rhinebeck is necessarily overrated. It's surprising that that is the fiber festival that everyone has clung on to as like the mecca of all fiber festivals. And though I haven't been myself, so I can't say whether or not it's any better than another fiber festival. You know, take that with a grain of salt. So I don't know if it's overrated. I think the fiber festivals are great, and I think that the New York Sheep and Wool Festival is probably also great. Not sure how it compares with other festivals. We probably annoy sheep and wool folks there. I would probably agree. I've not heard of any other yarn festival or fiber festival where so many people come from outside the area just for the experience. There's a lot of people that go to Rhinebeck. Lots and lots of people. I am from New York, and now that I am more into knitting and crochet and whatnot, the fiber arts in general, I feel like I would love to go to Rhinebeck, but I also feel like it feels like Rhinebeck is just for people who travel there. It doesn't feel like Rhinebeck is for locals, and that's just me as an outsider and my perspective. So let me know if you've been to Rhinebeck, if you feel like it has a different feel than that, but to me it feels like it's a lot of outside people coming in, and so not as much for the locals, but it's got a great price point and it's in a really cute area. It's a great time of year for a fiber festival in upstate New York because the fall weather is beautiful. So it would be amazing to be able to go, but I think I would go more under the local tourist assumption rather than someone traveling from far away. I might go with my mom one day because she's also in New York State. Who knows? Let me know what you think of Rhinebeck. I think that fiber festivals are great, but not sure how that one in particular compares to others, except for what I've heard from people talking about Rhinebeck. Suri and Mohair are overrated. Ooh, overrated. I think, oh, whoops, dropped a stitch. I kind of do think that they're overrated. I do think they are great fibers. I want to try Suri one of these days because I know that it's different than Mohair and it would be really awesome to try. And I've only made a couple things using Mohair, but those things are really warm. There's a reason I don't wear them super often, and I'm using it right now, but I'm moving somewhere that's cold, so hopefully I'll get more wear out of it. But I feel like it's warm. It's a little bit itchy, not like superbly so. It's not as itchy to me as some really rustic fibers are, but it can be warm and itchy. I feel like it's nice to use different fibers and to showcase like the halo that Suri or Mohair has, but some people might not like it, and that's totally fine. I do like Mohair, but I don't like it as much as some people do. Some people love using Mohair, and through my personal experience, I found that I don't like it quite as much, and that's okay. Okay, I've got a couple here that are related to yarn, and I'm already realizing that I'm almost 10 minutes into my recording, so I'm gonna get a move on. Maybe I'll have to do a part 2. You can knit with cheap yarn, and it's great. Maybe, depending on the yarn, for sure. There's some inexpensive yarns that are really great quality, and it depends on the fiber content and what works for your project. The more experience I get in knitting and crocheting, the more I am drawn to more luxury fibers and to more wool-based fiber contents. But that doesn't mean that cheap yarn or that acrylic yarn is bad at all. I think you need to figure out what is best to make with what you've got, if that makes sense. I've learned that I personally don't like using acrylic yarns in sweaters, but I don't mind using inexpensive wool-based yarns like a Knit Picks palette or something. It is nice to be able to use luxury fibers, but that is a privilege for sure. And cheap yarn is great. I think if you find that the yarn and the pattern work together, then you can get a great match. It doesn't matter what that yarn is and how much it costs at all. But I do think that certain fiber contents do better for certain projects. This person says, I love Red Heart. Everything has a place. Retro Stripes sucks though. They love Red Heart, which is a very well-known, inexpensive yarn brand that has a lot of acrylic yarns. A lot of people started the fiber arts using that yarn, and once they touched a different yarn, they realized how scratchy that some of those inexpensive acrylic yarns can be. And now there's a lot of acrylic yarns right now in this day and age that are way more comfortable to work with and have a much better feel than 10, 15, 20 years ago. If you look also, Red Heart is not just their super saver inexpensive yarn. There's a lot more, though apparently Retro Stripes doesn't have good things to say about them, but I don't know Retro Stripes. But that's Red Heart for you, and I think that as you do more looking into those more inexpensive brands, you'll see more budget-friendly options that are a good fit for the projects you want to use. Like Loops and Threads is Michael's in-house brand, and they had a cozy wool merino DK weight wool and acrylic blend that I've used for socks for gifts, and it was amazing to make DK weight socks that were super wash, that were easy to wash and dry because they had that strong acrylic content, but they had the wool, and so they felt really nice on your feet and, you know, do what wool does. They keep the warmth in. Do your looking around because it's not just the very cheapest option. There's lots of yarn lines within inexpensive brands that are great to use. Using expensive yarn doesn't make you better than everyone else. It makes you snobbier than everyone else, and it make me hate you. Oh, some strong words. This person had some rage to get out. I think it depends on how you use your yarn. Like I said before, using more expensive or luxury yarns is a privilege. There are certain circumstances people are in where they can or cannot afford that, or even certain seasons of life where they can or cannot afford that. I'm grateful for what I've been able to use. I am proud of the yarn that I have, and it's inspiring to me, and it makes me excited to make things, but there's nothing wrong with having an expensive yarn. People being snobby about it, that's not okay. There's no better yarn. It's whatever yarn you want to use that's a good fit for your project. It's probably not going to be a good idea to use acrylic yarn for a dishcloth. Like a cotton or like a cotton blend fiber would work a lot better. If you want to make socks, probably a yarn with nylon in it would be a better thing, or like a polyamide or something like that would be better. But I think better yarns are only in the context of what you choose to make with them. It doesn't matter how much they cost. It doesn't really matter what fiber content they have or where you bought them from. What matters is whether or not they're a good fit for the project you want to make. The price of the yarn does not matter. This person says, I hate mostly undyed yarn with a few speckles. Come on, give me some color. I do know that some dyers have a propensity for very, very pale, almost undyed colorways, and to some extent, they can be really beautiful, but I do understand that, like, sometimes you just want more. One of the benefits of having hand-dyed yarn is the vibrancy and the variety of the colors. If it's a variegated yarn or, like, has lots of different colored speckles. If you're getting something that is gently dyed, it can feel unfulfilling. But I think that's the dyer's prerogative to dye yarn that feels right for them, and I personally don't mind colors like that. This person does, but I understand why they could feel like, give me more to my yarn. I don't want just a couple speckles and like a pale pink, but those colors are beautiful in their own right. And I personally don't like super big, bold, flashy colors. I do have some for like socks and stuff, but if I was gonna make a garment, I would want something more subtle anyway, just my personal preference. And then last one related to yarn. Someone with a small or non-existent stash is not superior to someone with a large stash. Oh, this is interesting. So when I first read this question, I got it mixed up in my brain. Basically, a minimal crafter is not superior to someone with a large stash. And I think that there's a lot of people nowadays that are leaning into the minimalism thing, and I am working towards that. Not there yet, for sure. But working towards that. It's a process. It's a journey for sure of filling my life with intentional things only. In general, no one should be making anyone else feel bad for how they do things. How they knit, how they crochet, what fibers they choose to use, what yarns they choose to spend their money on, how much yarn they choose to have, or even like how often they knit or crochet. I think when I first became really immersed in this fiber arts community, I felt like I want to knit and crochet all the time. I want to do it all because I love it, and there's so many patterns that I want to make, and that's awesome. But also, like, there's so many more parts of me that are not related to the fiber arts. I love to read. I love to spend time with my family. I love to do other crafts. I love to be outdoors and things like that. I do not need to be spending 100% of my time knitting and crocheting. Granted, I do still spend a lot of my time, but that's besides the point. No one should be shaming anyone else for the choices they make for their craft, because it's all personal, and everyone can be part of this community regardless of the cost of their stash, regardless of how big their stash is, regardless of how often they choose to knit or crochet or do other fiber arts. They all should be welcome in this community. And just because someone makes a different choice than you on their stash doesn't make them any less worthy of respect. Man, I've got a lot of these to get through. Here's some DPN opinions. One says DPNs rule, and the other says knitting a sock with DPNs is not hard. So I'm gonna address these both. I would not say that DPNs rule. To me, they're frustrating, a little bit fiddly. Like, it's really hard to start a project on DPNs. It's really easy to drop your stitches and to like lose your needles and whatnot. Once your project is established, you've got a lot of ladders to worry about. It just, for me, it wasn't fun. It was a little bit too fiddly of like getting my yarn wrapped around other needles and having to untangle. I felt like every other row just because things were getting like all caught on themselves. So that's my personal preference. I do not think DPNs rule. As far as knitting a sock with DPNs is not hard. I knit like 3/4 of a toddler sock on DPNs. I did not enjoy it. It wasn't fun. And granted, if you started learning to knit on DPNs, I'm sure you're way more comfortable than I am on DPNs. You do you if you want to use DPNs, if you think that they work great for you. But for me, I really enjoy Magic Loop, and I even use 9-inch circulars quite often. Fine by me, you know, that's what I enjoy, and I really enjoy the process of knitting more when it's not on a DPN. I'm not a fan of DPNs. I would love to become more comfortable because I feel like it makes me feel like a true knitter. But I also don't need to, because I can be a true knitter on whatever needles I use. Okay, here's some construction things based on projects. Raglans suck. Now, I don't know why this person says raglans suck. I don't know, because I really enjoy raglans. This is one. Ta-da! I like the seam that a raglan makes. I think it looks really cool. I like that you know where your increases are going. They're all in the same spots in a tasteful way. There's some designs that have a very beautiful raglan increases that use cables or lace or, you know, other things like that in order to like highlight that seam. I don't mind a good circular yoke as well, but I do really enjoy a raglan. It's not hard to get a good fit in a sweater knitted in pieces. You know what? People give knitting sweaters in pieces a bad rap, but I could see where this person's coming from, that it's not that hard to get a good fit. If you need to make adjustment, you can make it a little longer, make the armholes a little bigger. You don't have to rip out as much because you're doing panels, and you can more specifically change certain measurements. Like, for example, on a yoked sweater, if you need your yoke depth decreased, but you don't want extra stitches because your bust size has already been met, then you have to do some math and finagling in order to make that fit you the way you want. But if you do a front panel and a back panel, then it's a lot easier to make those small adjustments in just the direction you need it in. So I would definitely agree. And I am in the process of knitting my first seamed sweater for my husband for his Christmas present. And I'm looking forward to it because a lot of it is mental. You know, the worry that a fitted sweater is like so much effort to knit, going back and forth, and like the seaming is so hard, and it's not really. You can totally do it. It's fine. You can totally do it. Yeah, it's a mental game for sure. Okay, this person, ooh, all caps, do not post your yarn receipts ever. Now, what they're referring to, I think, is sometimes when a yarn dyer has an update and they're like, yay, like collection is live, some people will purchase their yarn and then take a screenshot of the yarn that they purchased, and they'll share it on their Instagram stories, maybe tag the dyer to let them know like, hey, this is what I got, so excited. I understand this person's sentiment because I do feel like it's tacky, and I know that I've done it in the past occasionally because I feel like I'm hyping up the dyer and like letting them know how excited I am, but I also know that that can be tacky because you're basically sharing with people how much you spend, even if you X out the actual cost. You know, people see you're buying like 5 skeins of this and 3 skeins of this, like that adds up. It's the privilege of being able to buy nicer yarn, and it's not very tasteful to be rubbing that up in everyone's face. I can feel that, and I haven't posted any yarn receipts like that in a while. It just felt kind of weird, but it is fun to like hype up the dyer too, so I'm not sure. Let me know what you think down below. Like, would you post what yarn you purchased? Would you be a little bit more vague? Sometimes I'm like, oh, I bought yarn for this project, I'm really excited about it, so it's like not quite as tacky as like a actual receipt or like your order confirmation. But I don't know, let me know what you think down below, because I feel like that's kind of like a gray area where like I can see both sides of the coin, but I'd probably lean more towards just don't post them. It's not tasteful. Oh, we've got some that are literally not related. Please give me pickup lines that always work. Did they read the question I asked? If you know of any good fiber-related pickup lines, let me know down below. Ooh, this one is about socks, and you know how I love socks. I don't like crochet socks. The fabric is too thick and they are uncomfortable. The fabric that crochet makes is very different than the fabric that knitting makes, and it is thicker for sure. I've only made 1 pair of crochet socks, and I would love to make more pairs that are more wearable, since I know that a lot of people feel this way. I don't wear my crochet socks very often, but it's because they're really snug over my heel and ankle. I kind of agree with them. I love my knit socks, and so comparing crochet socks to knit socks means I almost always choose a knit sock first because I like how those feel. But I think that crochet socks don't have to be too thick and uncomfortable. I just gotta figure out how to design a crochet sock that doesn't feel like that. Or let me know if you know of any fun patterns down below where the fabric isn't too thick. Socks don't need to be blocked. Just put them on your feet. Yes, I agree. That person is so right. You don't really need to block socks, but I like to. They look so nice when they're like laid flat and on a sock blocker and they've like been recently washed. They look different than if they've been on your foot and they're like kind of balled up. kind of funny. I like blocking my socks. I like blocking my knits. And I use some nice smelling wool wash and I just enjoy it. Part of my routine of finishing a project is to block it. Tube socks are terrible. Why would you go through all that trouble to knit socks that don't fit well? I don't know. I don't know why people would do that. Honestly, the only tube socks I've made, I'm working on a tube sock right now that I'm going to have cut in heels, toes, and cuffs for. So I don't think that's what they mean. I think they mean socks that don't have a separate heel construction. I don't know, though I know that tube socks might work well for kiddos. That's really the only thing I can think of, but I don't know. Do people actually knit tube socks? I recently came out with a video where I talked about different very beginner friendly sock patterns. And so if you are afraid to try a heeled sock because you've never done it before, just check out that video and get some ideas on projects you can make. There are a couple tube sock patterns. They do have a ribbing texture at the heel in order to like help it conform to the heel a little bit better. I do agree that heeled socks are better than tube socks in general. So you should definitely conquer that fear and do it. Everyone who keeps knitting short row heels and ending up unhappy with how their socks fit, just go knit the heel flap and gusset. They're not hard and your feet will thank you. I don't know if I've met people that keep trying to knit short row heels and complain about it. I haven't met anyone that's complained like that, but I do know people have different preferences. I loved knitting the Fish Lips Kiss heel, but I've had issues with my sock like sliding down a little bit, and I need to keep trying and see if I need to change where I place my heel. Maybe. I'm just not quite sure. I do think I like a heel flap and gusset better. But yes, that's the beauty of socks, is that there's so many different constructions and techniques. So if one technique is not working great for you, try something else and see how it works. And maybe you'll find your new favorite heel or your new favorite toe, your new favorite cast on. Always worth exploring. I think I'm kind of in the mood to explore some new techniques. So let me know if you know of any fun techniques for socks that aren't super mainstream. Okay, ooh, this one has some language. Knitting and crochet tutorials aren't nail pageants. So I think they're referring to the fact that some people get their nails done very nicely before they do filming for their hands if they're showing something on camera. I don't mind that. I've never been bothered by people who have nice nails. I've been bothered by my own personal nails when they're not looking nice. So I understand the self-conscious desire to like get your nails looking nice before you show them on camera online, because some people online are really mean, and even though you create great content, they'll still make comments about you that are cruel, honestly. And so if you feel more comfortable getting your nails done or making your mohair mouth or making your hair look really nice before you film, then go for it. If that's what you want to do it. I've tried to show up on my videos as my true self. Sometimes I wear makeup, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm wearing glasses and sometimes I'm wearing contacts. Usually I'm freshly showered, but not always. Come as you are for sure. But also, if you want to do yourself up nice, that's great too. These are some other really fun ones. Oh, okay. Don't join an MKAL if you're going to be picky about the final result. If you have been watching, there's been an MKAL going on. A certain designer who has some eclectic and beautiful styles. They're definitely not for everyone. For this one, see again, like I can see both sides of it. I know myself and I knew that I probably wouldn't enjoy doing a Stephen West MKAL, for example, because his style is just so far out from my own. I can appreciate the art of his work, but I knew that I wouldn't enjoy it. I might not enjoy the process, but I definitely wouldn't enjoy spending so much time on a shawl that I probably wouldn't like at all. Honestly, it's my own, personal style choices. And so I didn't join, though I feel like I've been missing out because I feel like everyone joined. But I also feel like tons of people dropped out, which is totally fine because they just felt like it wasn't for them. I think that people have a right to be picky about the final result. I think, they know that they're getting into a mystery knit along and they know that they might not end up liking it. And I think it's okay halfway through or towards the end to decide, you know what, this isn't for me, and to step away. I think that's totally fine. I think it's totally fair to join a knit along and to stop for whatever reason. If you didn't like how it was looking, if you felt like you wanted to change your yarn choices, if life got busy and you couldn't keep up, if you just decided you didn't want to anymore, any reason to join an MKAL and any reason to drop out, totally valid, totally fine. For someone like me who knows I would have been too picky to do one of Stephen West's patterns, seeing people drop out, I can understand how this person might be getting annoyed that like everyone was all about the MKAL and now everyone is like saying it's not for them and like leaving the MKAL. It can feel like a broken record to see that so often, but I think it just reiterates that mystery knit-alongs aren't for everybody, and that specific mystery knit-along was not for everybody, and that's just how it be sometimes. The only mystery knit-alongs I've done is Sarah Shira's Gnome mystery knit-along, and that's been really fun. I've done that twice now. And I think I've enjoyed that because I'm learning new things. I don't know what's coming, but I can use stash yarn. It's a quick, small project that's not a sock. And it's just so different from everything else that I knit that it's just really refreshing and different. And you know what? Whatever the outcome is for a gnome for me, I know that I would like it. You know, just the gnominess of it. And so I'm okay with a mystery. Some people like the experience of doing a mystery knit along, like the community of it, and that's why they do it. And some people think that they'll really like the end result, and that could be true or not. Who knows? But I would much rather people are true to themselves and recognize if the end result is not what they are going to enjoy, and they rip it out and they use that yarn to make something beautiful that they actually really love. That's my own personal opinion. You don't have to swatch for everything. Yes, swatch for garments, but accessories, just start knitting. You'll figure it out pretty soon if your gauge is too far off. And I wholeheartedly agree with this. I definitely swatched for my sweater because swatching gives you more information to help you pick the best size for yourself. You do not want to do extra knitting and create a very oversized piece that you're not going to wear, or to spend all that time knitting a garment that doesn't fit at all because it's too tight. As far as accessories, for something small enough that I know I'd be okay just redoing it if it doesn't fit right, like a sock or a hat, I do not swatch. Or something like a shawl where I just need to know I like the fabric of it. I don't need to necessarily fit a certain size parameter. Agreed. Don't need to swatch. I recently knit a hat and I did not swatch at all. I used what was called for in the pattern, and I knew that, you know what, if I'm halfway through this hat and I have to rip it out because it's too small or too big, I can do that, and it would be a bummer, but I chose to do that and run that risk instead of doing a gauge swatch. And I think that I'm getting more and more comfortable, especially with like knitting socks, that I can recognize whether or not a sock will fit my foot well before I get to the end of a sock. So yes, swatch for garments, things that are very specifically sized, bigger items, definitely swatch. But for something smaller, it'll be fine. And you know what? If you make a hat and it's too small for you, you can give it to someone else. You can give it to a kid, and that's fine too. So, you know, just know your risks. Take the risks you're willing to take. But for a small project, that like a DK weight hat that took me like 3 days, honestly, to finish, if that didn't fit me, I could give it to someone else, or I could redo it, spend another 3 days. That's not that long. This, however, is taking me weeks and weeks. If I have a size that I don't like, then I'm never going to wear it, and that's a waste. I totally agree. Swatch for garments, but not for accessories. You can swatch for accessories if you want to. I'm not going to harp on you for that. Brioche is not scary. Thoughts on this? Because I think brioche is really fun to do. I've not done a ton. I do think it'd be fun to learn different stitches, not just increasing and decreasing. I think though for brioche, fixing brioche is kind of scary. Just the anatomy of your stitches is so different than regular knitting and purling that it can feel really hard to fix your mistakes. And I feel like that's a very important skill to have as a knitter or crocheter, is knowing what are you going to do when you drop a stitch, when you find out you only grabbed half of the yarn in your yarn over, if there's a knot in your yarn that comes undone lower down. Just gauge, you need to figure out like what do you do about an issue. And fixing brioche is kind of scary for me. Though Gigi Made It said it's not hard, it's just new. And I love that sentiment. because the more you practice brioche, the less scary it is. And then by the time you're comfortable with it, you're like, why was I scared of this? I agree that brioche is not scary, but I also understand why it would be intimidating, because it was intimidating for me. And it felt like something that only experienced knitters use. And you know what? I just went for it, and I spent an evening watching some videos and practicing a gauge swatch, and then I dove into my shawl project. I think it was Fortnight by MKALs, and it turned out great. It's awesome, and now I love brioche. Be willing to stretch yourself a little bit. It's not as scary as you think it is. Okay, last one. Just because you don't understand why something is happening in a pattern doesn't mean the pattern is wrong. I think it's easy to, especially if you've done multiple patterns before, you don't really know where this one's going. You're confused about like where to put things, or like the construction, how things are shaped, and it can be stressful to not know what's happening. But that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the pattern, because interesting constructions are honestly really fun to make. Trust the process. I agree. Just because you don't understand something doesn't mean that the pattern is wrong. And as a designer, I've worked with test knitters, and I've worked with even people looking for pattern support, and it can be frustrating for me as a designer when I feel like people just don't get it, and I'm trying to tell them like, you're making this too hard. It really is simpler than that. How can I help you understand? Because like sometimes your brain just doesn't get it. It just hasn't clicked for you. And sometimes you need to put that project down and come back to it later. Sometimes your brain just doesn't mesh with a designer's brain very well, and you just think very differently, and your styles for like reading and writing the pattern don't match up, and that's okay too. It's a bummer, but it's totally understandable. Sometimes you watch tutorials on YouTube and they totally make sense and you learn the thing, but sometimes you need to watch a few different types of tutorials before you really get a grasp of what you're trying to learn. And that's just different teaching styles, you know, different pattern designers, and your maker brain and how they all work together. I do encourage you that if you feel like you're making something, you don't understand what's happening, you need some clarity, reach out to people who've made the pattern. Maybe check out the hashtag. Something that I did once, I saw a post on Instagram that I really, really loved. They did some modification to like a sleeve or something. I was planning on making that pattern, so I actually reached out to that person and was like, hey, I'm planning on making such and such a pattern. Do you have any tips for like doing this thing or like getting past this one part? That's the awesome part about this online community, is that you can talk to people like that online. Also, not being shy to seek after pattern support from the actual designer themselves. They don't want you to be in the dark. They don't want you to be confused. They want to help you understand what's going on. So reach out to them and try to figure it out. If you need to put your project off to the side to clear your brain a little bit, look at something else and then come back to it later, maybe it'll all make sense to you. And sometimes also designers make mistakes and there might be something wrong with the pattern and they won't ever know if you never reach out to them. I'm all for communication. Awesome. That is all my unpopular crochet, knitting, fiber, crafty related opinions that I collected on my Instagram account. Make sure to follow me over there if you want to participate in more polls and voting and sharing some things with me that I like to share over here on YouTube. I've gotten a little bit farther, maybe a couple rows done. This is my marker from the beginning of the week. So this is how much I've done this whole week, not necessarily just sitting here and chatting with you. But it was nice to put in a few stitches on this and take some time while my daughter is napping to just chat with you and talk about these unpopular opinions. Whatever your opinions are, I urge you to just be thoughtful and considerate of all other makers and to support them as members of this community. And if you don't maybe understand why someone has the opinion they do, reach out and chat with them. Sharing these opinions was just something fun to share, some things that are like more personal. You know, each of our making journeys is very different in the preferences that we have. And I think it's fun to just discuss that and get to know one another. If you have any unpopular knitting opinions, let me know down in the comments below. I would love to hear what you are passionate about, all in good fun too. And if there's anything else that you want me to share in maybe a future video, a part 2 to this, let me know as well. Until next time, happy making. Bye.